بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم أما بعد. To continue in the study of the book تذكرة السامع والمتكلم of Ibn Jamaah rahimahullah, we have reached point number 8 in this chapter that we are taking, the first chapter of the book. He says number 8, before we get to that, the author, firstly, he mentioned that from the manners of the Sunnah scholar is that he upholds the obligations that have come in the religion of Islam. And then after that he pays concern also to the voluntary acts. So he does that which is obligatory upon him, and then he holds on to that which is from the voluntary acts. Along with that, now the author rahimahullah is going to mention that from that which the scholar and the student should beautify himself with is that he should also have noble manners. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he said in a hadith, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ, and another narration, صَالِحَ الْأَخْلَاقِ, that I've been sent to complete the noble manners, or the noble manners. So here, it's a must that we understand that the student of knowledge is more in need of having noble manners and more deserving of it, as we took in our classes of the poem At-Ta'iyya of Imam al-Bir rahimahullah. So that's a must, that a student of knowledge beautifies himself with the noble manners that is from them which the author rahimahullah mentioned here. So he says rahimahullah that from the manners, or the noble manners, is dealing with the people with good manners, from smiling, spreading the salam, feeding, repressing one's anger, not harming the people, dealing with the harm that occurs from the people, putting the people forth, and being unselfish, whilst not seeking it for oneself, being just and fair with them, whilst not seeking it for oneself. Now this point here, the author mentioned rahimahullah, that being just and fair with others, whilst not seeking that justice for oneself, then Al-Shaykh Abu Amr al-Hajuri, he mentions that this is in accordance to one's capability, but he has the right to take his right. But if he sees that if you forgive this certain individual, that he'll be accepted or become better, and his evil will stop and will benefit him by you forgiving him and looking past what occurred, then in this case, this is better. And for that reason Allah says, وَالْعَافِينَ عَنِ النَّاسِ, those who forgive the people. But if you forgiving him leads to his evil increasing and becoming worse, then in this case it is not permissible to forgive him. Rather, you take your right back. Why? Because in this case he's only going to increase evil upon evil. Then the author mentions that thanking also from the noble manners, or dealing with good manners, is thanking them for favors. If someone gives you something, you thank them for the favor, or they do something for you, thank them for it. Bringing them ease, completing their affairs, using one's position to intercede for them, being kind to the poor, and being compassionate and loving to the neighbors and relatives, being kind to the students and helping them, as will come inshaAllah. Now this chapter is something great, as the scholars have written books on manners, which is not hidden from anyone, to mention to the people these manners so that they may benefit from them. Thus it is befitting for the student of knowledge that he pays concern to this chapter and strive in learning it and acting in accordance to it. He should not be looked at by the people as a person or an individual from the general folk. When they look at him, they think he is just like the rest of them. Rather, they should look at him and see the signs of benefit on him and the good manners that his knowledge calls him to. Now, some of the scholars, they mentioned that perhaps bad manners may be a reason for not benefiting from knowledge and being deprived of it. Example, if you do not have knowledge or you do not have good manners with your teacher, how will you benefit from him? If you do not have good manners with your book, how will you benefit from the book? For that reason, they used to advise that you start with manners before seeking knowledge. And some of the narrations and the points which are mentioned regarding that, we covered in the earlier part of this book. So we covered some of the narrations pertaining to that. Then the author rahimahullah mentions, and if he sees someone not praying properly, or not purifying himself properly, or anything, not doing something which is obligatory properly, then he directs him in a kind compassionate manner, as the Prophet ﷺ he did with the Bedouin who urinated in the masjid, and similarly as he did with Muawiyah ibn al-Hakam when he spoke in the prayer. As for the urination in the masjid, then the Prophet ﷺ explained to this Bedouin in a nice manner that this masjid is not built except for the dhikr of Allah and a salah and etc., and not built for the purpose of urinating. So for that reason, the Bedouin, he was happy with the way the Prophet dealt with him, and he thanked him for it, and he made dua. As for the narration of Muawiyah ibn al-Hakam radiallahu anhu when he spoke in the prayer, then the hadith of Muawiyah is when Allah's Messenger he finished. In that hadith, it is mentioned that when the Prophet finished, he called me. He said, "May my father and mother be ransom for him. Neither did he hit me, nor rebuke me, nor revile me. Neither did he hit me, nor rebuke me, nor revile me. I've never seen a better teacher than him, before or after." He said, "This prayer of ours is not the place for ordinary human speech. Rather, it is glorification and magnification of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and reciting Quran." So here we see the way the Prophet dealt with him. He did not hit him, nor rebuke him, nor revile him, until it placed in the heart of Mu'awiyah ibn Hakam. He said, "I've never seen a better teacher than him before or after." Also, the Prophet was described as kind and merciful, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent him as a mercy for all of mankind. But he was described as kind and merciful, as comes in the hadith of Malik ibn al-Huwayrith radiallahu anh, and he said, "We came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we were a few young men of approximately equal age, and we stayed with him for 20 nights. Then he thought that we were anxious for our families, and he asked us whom we had left behind to look after our families, and we told him he was kind-hearted and merciful. So he said, return to your families and teach them religious knowledge, and order them to do good deeds, and offer your prayers in the way you saw me offering my prayers. And when the starting time for the prayer becomes due, then one of you should pronounce his call, the adhan, the elders of you should lead the prayer." The shahid, the point of reference here, is that he was kind-hearted and merciful. So the student of knowledge and a scholar should be as such, that if they see certain mistakes occurring from the general folk or from anyone, that they try to teach them and encourage them and guide them with a nice, kind way, and perhaps that kindness might stay in his heart, and due to that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will guide him. But if one were to be harsh to the people, then it would turn the people away, and they may not benefit from it. But one may ask, what about at times? Is it beneficial and recommended at times to use some kind of harsh speech or to admonish someone while teaching them? Then yes, it can occur. Imam Bukhari rahimahullah mentioned in his book chapter being angry during admonition or teaching if he sees that which he disliked. Thus at times it's permissible to show that you're unhappy with something and admonish and give advice which may seem a bit harsh to the individual. Now at this instance, when this occurs, the individual should not hold that against him, and should not say, why is he being rude to me and harsh to me? Why? Because perhaps he sees that this is a way that will benefit you. So if a teacher or a scholar at times sees that the way you'll be benefited is by an admonition or using some form of harshness, then one should not look at that as why me and why is he being harsh with me. Rather, in this case, you should look at it as the teacher is intending to correct my affair and seeking good for me. So in that case, you should accept the advice and not be from those who let the shaitan fool him and turn him away from seeking knowledge. Now it comes in the narration of Al-A'mash that some of his companions were with him, so he rebuked one of them. So one of them said to the one rebuked, if he had said that to me, I would have not came to him. Meaning, A'mash rebuked one, and so someone else said to the one being rebuked, that if he had said that to me, I would not have came to him. So A'mash heard him say this, and he said, do you want him to be a fool like you? Do you want him to be a fool like you? Meaning, this is for your benefit, so don't use it to be put off. This advice and admonition and rebuking is for your benefit, so that perhaps you may change your affair and change your ways and benefit by it. And as we took in the Ta'iyya of Al-Albiri, at times you rebuked him, as some of them said as his son, and others said no as his companion, but nonetheless he rebuked him at times. Why? Because at times rebuking and this is a benefit for the one that it needs to be advised. Perhaps that might take him away from that which he is upon. So yes, the asal is, the origin is that you are nice and kind and compassionate. But at times if you see that there may be some form of rebuking needed or some admonition with some harshness, then in that case it is beneficial. But a person, the one being advised, should not look at it as if he is being rebuked for no reason. Rather, it's an advice, and that should lead him to change his affair and not be put off from seeking knowledge. Then the author rahimahullah mentions the 9th one, after the 8th one. He says that before we get to that, the completeness of oneself revolves around two things. To complete oneself, it revolves around two affairs. The first one is that you purify yourself from lowly affairs. The first one is that you purify yourself from lowly affairs. And the second one is that you beautify yourself with virtues. So a person, if he wants to complete himself and complete his manners and as such, then first and foremost, he should purify himself from lowly affairs, meaning bad manners, and things that are looked at as lowly. And then, along with that, he should also beautify it with virtues, beautify himself with virtues. Leave off the bad manners and the lowly affairs, and beautify yourself with high noble manners and characteristics and virtues. Thus he should purify himself and beautify himself. At-takhliya wa tahliya, as the scholars mentioned. Then the scholar Ibn Jamaah rahimahullah mentions here that he purifies himself from lowly manners and upholds the noble, pleaseworthy manners. From the lowly manners that he's going to mention here, such as spite, having spite and envy, transgressing, anger for other than the sake of Allah, cheating, arrogance, showing off, being self-amazed with oneself, being miser, being evil, and having evil desires, competing in regards to the dunya, showing it off, and beautifying to the people by way of it, loving to be praised with that which he hasn't done, being blind from one's shortcomings, and being occupied with other people's shortcomings, being fanatic and partisan for other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, desire and fear for other than Allah, backbiting, tail carrying, slandering, lying, and indecent speech, belittling the people even if they are under him in status. Be warned from these characteristics and lowly manners, for it is the door of all evil, rather it is all evil. And these are the manners that he mentioned that are lowly, and a student of knowledge should stay far away from it, and should not fall into any of these manners. And as is well known, if one were to try to take these manners one by one, then that would take lessons and lessons, and it would take a very long time. So for that reason, we have sufficed ourselves with just reading with what the author mentioned are considered from lowly manners. Again, we'll repeat it due to the benefit, since some of these affairs, many of us may fall into it, and we do not know even of it. Rather, we fall into it without even being aware of it. So from them is spite and envy, transgressing, anger for other than the sake of Allah, cheating, arrogance, showing off, being self-amazed with oneself, being miser, being evil, and having evil desires, competing in regards to the dunya, showing it off. And this is a musibah now. People nowadays, they have a lot of dunya and they show it off, and they're competing in the dunya. And you'll find that even some of the Muslims fall into this, where they look and they show off on Instagram, on Snapchat, on this and that, and they show off. And maybe a reason for your ni'mah, the ni'mah being taken away from you, as some of the scholars mentioned from the Ibn Hazm, and beautifying to the people by way of it, loving to be praised with that which he hasn't done, being blind from one's own shortcomings and being occupied with other shortcomings, being fanatic and partisan for other than Allah, desire and fear for other than Allah, backbiting, tail carrying, slandering, lying, and indecent speech, belittling people even if they are under him in status. Be warned from these characteristics and lowly manners, for it is the door of evil, rather it is all evil. Now, especially the student of knowledge, he should not have these manners. He must distinguish himself from others. It is very important for the one seeking knowledge and the student of knowledge that he is not to be known amongst the people, for example, as a cheater or as a liar. Because if he is known to be a liar, how will people accept his call? How will people accept the da'wah that he's given them if he's known to be a liar or a cheater? Or if he's known to compete with the people in regards to dunya and try to attain the dunya and then showing that off, how will the people trust him? How will the people be from those who will listen to him and take him seriously? So the student of knowledge especially, and the scholar should beautify himself from not having these manners. Rather, he should be the furthest away from these manners, because these are lowly manners and they're not something that a student of knowledge and a scholar should have, let alone even the awam, the general folk, they should not have these manners, but let alone the student of knowledge and the scholar. Then the author mentions some of those with evil souls from the fuqaha, the scholars of jurisprudence of this time, have been tried with many of these characteristics, except for those whom Allah has saved, especially envy, self-amazement, showing off and belittling the people. The cure for this is found in the books of Al-Raqa'iq, heart softeners. So the one who wants to purify himself from this, then let him look into those books. And the most beneficial of it is the book of Al-Muhasibi, the book of Al-Muhasibi Al-Ri'aya. Now this book of Al-Muhasibi Al-Ri'aya, Al-Muhasibi, he is one whom the scholars they warned from them Imam Ahmad rahimullah, as he was at the time Imam Ahmad. So he warned from him. And it comes from Sa'id ibn Amr al-Bardha'i, that he said that I witnessed Abu Zur'a al-Razi, and he was asked about Muhasibi in his books. So he said, إِيَّاكَ وَهَذِي الْكُتُبِ هَذِي كُتُبْ بِدْعَ وَالضَّلَالَاتِ بِدْعَ وَالضَّلَالَاتِ. Beware of these books. These are books of innovation and misguidance. These are books of innovation and misguidance. And Imam Ahmad rahimahullah used to warn from Al-Muhasibi. So it is not befitting to mention that the most beneficial is the book of Al-Muhasibi Al-Ri'aya. Rather, this book, as it is mentioned, that it is a book of the Sufis. That the books of the Sufis, this is from it and should be stay away from. As Muhasibi, they mention, he was an ascetic Shaykh al-Sufiya, the Shaykh of the Sufi. So this book, one should stay away from. So if we warn someone from this book and say stay away from this book, then we must give him another option of what to read instead. The best of it to read, to have a heart softener, is the Quran. The best of books for softening your heart, أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبِ, with the remembrance of Allah, the hearts find tranquility. The best of the books to have tranquility and soften your heart is the Quran. But if one wants to read a book which is on this subject and this topic, then Shaykh Al-Hamidi advised with the following books, such as Fawaid Ibn Al-Qayyim, Adab Al-Shari'iyya of Ibn Muflih, Mukhtasar Minhaj Al-Qasidin of Ibn Qudama, and also other scholars advise with books of Az-Zuhd generally, like the book of Az-Zuhd of Imam Ahmad, and also the book that Brother Abu Fajr is teaching, Ad-Da'i wa Dawa of Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah. They advise with this book a lot, that this book is very important to soften one's heart and to be from those books considered to be the best of the heart softeners. Then the author mentions rahimahullah that from the cures for envy is pondering over the fact. Before we get to that, Shaykh Salih al-Usaymi mentions that the author here mentioned that some of the evil souls from the fuqaha of this time have been tried with many of these characteristics. Then the Shaykh mentions, summarizing his speech, that this is something which one shouldn't mention that openly. That the scholars have these bad manners. For example, he said that someone wrote a book called Envy Amongst the Scholars. And he said this is something which is not something that one should write about and should do. Why? Because it leads to evil thoughts. It leads to evil thoughts. And this is something one knows nowadays. Example, you tell someone that the Shaykh says such and such and refuted so and so based upon such and such evidence. He'll say to you that this scholar has envy. He has jealousy. How does he know that? He does not know that, but because it is widespread amongst them nowadays, as the Shaykh mentions that nowadays is widespread, that the people say, speak like this, they'll say, oh, he's envious. He has jealousy. And this is something which one should stay away from. Rather, the scholar should be mentioned with good. And should not be mentioned especially amongst the general folk, that this one has envy, and this one is jealous, and this one is evil. And this. Why? Because that loses the respect for the scholar. And what happens is they start having evil thoughts, and due to what happens after that is that they don't benefit from the scholar, they don't benefit from knowledge that the scholar has. Rather, one should stay away from those kind of statements, or mentioning it so openly. Now the scholar mentions, even the Jamaah mentions, from the cures for envy, from the cures for this disease envy, is pondering over the fact that it is an objection upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in regards to His wisdom, which necessitated specifying the specific individual being envied with a bounty. That envy, the one who has jealousy and envies someone, he should ponder over the fact that it is an objection upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in regards to His wisdom, which necessitated specifying this specific individual being envied with a bounty. Also that which is in it from being sad and causing oneself sadness and anxiety and tiring one's heart and punishing it with that which does not harm the one being envied. Meaning that you are envying this individual you are tiring yourself out envying him, wanting what he has and his ni'mah being taken away. And you have anxiety and sadness due to that. You are punishing your own soul due to that. As for the one being envied, is not being punished due to that. He's not being harmed due to your envious soul. You'll find that the one whom is envious, he's not happy in his heart. His heart is always attached to what others have. He's not happy of himself. He sees other people with their bounty, he wants it. And he wants it taken away from them. He never has a state of tranquility where he is happy with his own self. Rather, he continuously wants what other people have in their hands. And he looks at what they have. Now, Shaykh al-Islam mentioned that there is no heart that is free from envy. There is no heart that is free from envy. But the honorable one is the one who hides it. There is no heart that is free from envy, but the honorable one is the one who hides it. Now, that means that one should strive against himself and not expose it. And he should be pleased with that which Allah has given others. He should be pleased with that which Allah has given others. Then he mentions, and we'll stop with this, end with this point, that from the cures of self-amazement is that he remembers that his knowledge and understanding, sharp mind, eloquence, and other than it, is from the bounties of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon him. And it is a trust with him, placed with him, that he gives it is true right, and Allah is able to take it away from him in the blink of an eye. As it was taken away from Bil'am in the blink of an eye. And that is not great upon Allah. Do they feel safe? أَفَأَمِنُوا مَكْرَ اللَّهِ. Do they feel safe from the plot of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So here he mentions that the cure for self-amazement is to have this thought and remember this, that this knowledge is a bounty from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon you. And if Allah willed and wishes, He'll take it away from you. You're entrusted to protect it. But if you are self-amazed with it, Allah can take away any time. As for Bil'am, then Bil'am is from, they mentioned from the scholars of Bani Israel, as mentioned in their reports, and he became self-amazed with himself, so Allah took away his knowledge. And it is mentioned in Nasa'i, fi Tafsir, that it comes in Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, that the ayah, وَاتْلُ عَلَيْهِمْ نَبَأَ الَّذِي آتَيْنَاهُ آيَاتِنَا فَانْسَلَخَ مِنْهَا فَأَتْبَعَهُ الشَّيْطَانُ فَكَانَ مِنَ الْغَاوِينَ. And recite, O Muhammad, to them the story of him to whom we gave our ayat, our proofs and evidences. But he threw them away, so Shaitan followed him up. And he became of those who went astray. قال هو بالعام. He said, the one who Allah is referring to is Bil'am. So this narration is authentic. This narration is authentic in Mas'ud regarding this ayah, that it is Bil'am being spoken about here. Now Shaykh Salih al-Hussein mentions a benefit that is befitting that an individual acknowledges that from the bounties of Allah upon him. That from the bounties of Allah upon him is letting him attain good. Is letting him attain good and good come to him. By permitting him to seek knowledge and making it beloved to him, making himself desire it and seek it, this is a great bounty which is befitting that he acknowledges it and thanks Allah for it. If you are to acknowledge it and thank Allah for it, He will increase you from it. Al-Allam Abdurrahman ibn Hassan al-Shaykh, he mentioned, indeed the bounties, if they are thanked for, they remain. And if they are not thanked for, they leave. But the bounties, if they are thanked for, they remain. And if they are not thanked for, they leave. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran that if you're to thank Him, لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ, I'll increase you. I will increase you on my bounties. So once you remember when seeking knowledge that Allah is the one who permitted him to seek this knowledge. Allah is the one who permitted him to open up the book and read. Allah is the one who gave him the bounty of understanding what he is reading. Allah is the one who gave the bounty of comprehending it and letting it stay in his mind to benefit himself and benefit others by it. He should not have self-amazement, for if Allah wants, He could take it at any moment, in the blink of an eye, as the author mentioned. And it should not be as such that Allah bestowed this bounty upon you, and you use this bounty which Allah has given you in that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not pleased with. You should use this bounty Allah has given you of wanting to seek knowledge, and having the desire to seek knowledge, and being from those who read books, and listen to audios, and listen to the scholars, and respect the scholars, and have good manners. Other than this, you should use it in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and having gratitude towards Him, and being thankful to Him, and also using in the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For that reason, the Prophet, when he was praying, until his feet became swollen, and Aisha radiallahu anha said to him that Allah forgave your previous sins that will come. Why are you doing this? He said, أَفَلَا أَكُونَ عَبْدًا شَكُورًا. The scholars take from this that actions are from thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If Allah bestowed knowledge upon, bless you with knowledge, and gave this bounty, to be from those who use this knowledge to benefit himself and better himself, and also spread that knowledge to others. For that reason, scholars have mentioned that the reason why someone gains knowledge is to raise ignorance from himself and raise ignorance from others. But you should not have self-amazement. I memorized such and such, I read such and such books, I listen to such and such, I do such and such. Rather, this should be left off. For if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses you with this, then it's a blessing from Allah. Thank Him and be sincere to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala in that. So inshallah we'll stop with this and continue next week inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan.